If you're anything like most women I know, the reason money stresses you out isn't because you're careless. It's usually because nobody's ever explained it in a way that makes sense once you've actually have a life to pay for. And it's never something that's really taught at school. Most of us are either taught nothing or shown a spreadsheet with a lot of numbers that don't really make sense and don't really match how we're spending and living our lives. So you grow up earning money, spending it, saving here and there when you can, and still wondering if you're doing it properly. I've worked in finance for 14 years, and something that became very clear very early on is that women who felt comfortable with money weren't always earning the most. They were the ones who understood their own situation. They generally knew where they stood with their money. And over time, I realised I tend to think about money in a certain way. It's not a system I sit down and necessarily label, but I always come back to the same few ideas. And I like to call it CALM, C-A-L-M, mostly because that's how money should feel. And also each letter stands for a different part of the story. So C stands for clarity, A for alignment, L for liquidity, and M for margin. Clarity is one of the most useful things you can know, and it's what your life actually costs. So things like your rent, mortgage, bills, food, transport, subscriptions, seeing friends, holidays. And if you don't know that number, then money can feel pretty unpredictable. You need to know this number so you're not second guessing it every single time. The next part is alignment, and this is where saving comes in. This is the area where I see women being very hard on themselves and much harder than they need to be. I hear, I'm bad at saving all the time, and most of the time it just means it hasn't been consistent. Actually, most people save when they can and don't when they can't, and that's actually very normal. What matters more than the number is whether what you're doing fits your life right now. And age does play a role here, even if we don't love admitting it. If you're watching this and you're in your 20s, you might be paying rent, building your career, maybe traveling, working things out. So saving anything regularly is just a really good place to be. You're building habits at that stage, not trying to get everything perfect. You might be in your 30s, so life usually feels quite full at this point in life. You might be earning more, your costs are probably going to be higher, and there's more going on around you. Yet saving still does matter, but it has to work alongside your life and not take over it. I'm in my mid-30s, and for me, saving is about balance. I want to live well now, whilst I have relatively good health, but yet I also want future me to feel looked after. So that doesn't mean I'm saving every spare pound I have. It just means knowing what I'm doing and being comfortable with it. Later on, as you get older, the numbers will change again. Not because you're ahead or behind, but because your priorities will change. So there isn't one correct savings number. There's only what works for you in the particular season that you're in. And then thirdly, there's liquidity, which, trust me, sounds much more complicated than it is. So this is just the money you can get to easily if something happens. A job change, a big bill, plans changing, life interrupting things, or you might need money to get out of a situation that makes you feel trapped. This is the money that means you're not panicking when something comes up. I've seen many women on very high salaries feel stressed because they didn't have this in place. And yet I've seen women earning much less feeling completely fine about it because they did. And the difference here isn't what these women are earning or what tax bracket they're in. It's just whether they felt covered. When you know money's there, you don't rush decisions. You don't agree to things out of fear. And you give yourself a bit more headspace to think. And then fourthly, the M, that's margin. So what is margin? Margin is the space between what you earn now and what you need. So two people can earn the same amount of money and have very different experiences of life depending on whether that space exists. One will feel stretched all the time, and the other will feel like they've got room here. That room makes everyday life feel much easier. It gives you options, and it makes change feel much less risky. So margin can come from earning more, spending less, or just being honest about what you actually want right now. It's not about cutting things back or feeling super squeezed. When you start to understand these 4 parts of your money, so what life costs, how you're saving, what you've got available, and whether there's any space, money stops feeling like something you're constantly trying to get on top of. It becomes something that supports your life instead of something that is hanging over it. So with all of my videos, there is no pressure here. You don't need to fix everything overnight, and you can return to this video as often as you need. But what I do want you to do is I want you to work through your numbers. I want you to observe them, eventually maybe adjust them, and potentially you might want to redesign your whole money system if needed. These are the kind of conversations I want to be having here. Money talked about normally and not pretending there's one right way to do it. If this helped things make a bit more sense, then I'm really glad you're here, and I'll see you in the next one.